Office is evolving, becoming simpler, more collaborative, more powerful. Its icons are evolving too, into a visual language that reflects the powerful simplicity and harmony of the Office apps. Unique symbols that adapt to their context across platforms, across devices. It's a new look at color, lighter, more vibrant hues, but still so familiar. A connected visual system that speaks to a faster, more intelligent, frictionless experience, designed to reflect the more connected, collaborative way we work today. It's the look of the new Office.
All right, it is, what day is it, Todd?
It's Office Flash Friday.
Oh, that's well stated, but it's actually August 9th, right? Last time I checked. I'm Doug Splinter.
I'm Todd Kidda.
And you're hiding behind, can we cut over to Todd? Can we what, okay, so Todd apparently got a new Surface Studio and he's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Our EC here in St. Louis, and I'm using our gear. So
yeah, nothing wrong with using the gear, right? So
we talked about maybe I should go a little Wilson, like.
You're aging yourself with that comment.
I know.
There's like half of our people who are watching this show who are like, "Who's that?"
I know.
So the okay, so I have just a few good things, but I'm pretty curated list this week around a really cool Teams announcement for a team solution. An Azure AD B2B item that I thought warranted some exploration that we have not covered in the past, I don't think, and is very compelling. And then a few other things. What do you got going on?
I've got a pretty just kind of average volume of stuff, which is good. Got some Power BI stuff, and I haven't really talked about PowerApps in a while, so we'll see how much we can let that breathe this week. There's been some goodness that's been.
Yeah, we sort of were cramming everything in last week. It was a busy week, right? So let's since you're on stage, why don't you light us off?
Rock and roll. All right, cool. So this one I'm excited about. We recently were one of the first cloud vendors, or maybe the first, in South Africa with Azure, and now we are enabling a Power BI region in South Africa, which is exciting. So we're up to 19 regions in our public cloud, in addition to like US Gov and China and Germany. So this is super exciting, especially now that with your premium capacities, you can choose which region your capacity is in. So more choice, more data sovereignty, all the things.
Also, more resiliency, because if you think about how we come into a region from an availability versus how other people come in or call themselves for, it means something rather significant to us from a redundancy and number of capacity and the resiliency and geographic separation of that capacity to come into a location. Right. And so we have a little higher bar for that than maybe some of our competitors do. So it really is a very significant thing when we come into one of these markets with an Azure region. So
no, it's exciting. So hats off to our team that's enabled South Africa. That's exciting. Man, Paginated reports just continue to kind of rock and roll. In July, we launched an update to the report builder to enable you to build Paginated reports on top of Power BI data sets. So let me actually ask you a question. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Your question.
I had an engagement with a customer this week, and the maturity of Power BI has been striking lately, because the conversations have been around data governance and enabling the end users. We're beyond kind of the base stuff at this point, and it's really about operational and enterprise rollout. I think with the advent of data flows and certified data sets and things like this, do you think that folks would like to see kind of a end-to-end on what that could look like to enable the users from certified data sets to models to visualizations?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So
I'll just say yes, and I'll also say I had a story this week I wanted to share with you around Power BI. And so it's becoming an increasing practice I've seen in a lot of my customers now, where they're taking their interns who are coming in, like college interns, and they're sending them to Dashboard Day and turning them loose on their data. Have you heard about this?
That's awesome. No,
we're now running dedicated Dashboard Day for interns here in Minneapolis. So we actually have like our corporate intern programs that are coming in for Dashboard Day.
That is very cool.
But here's the cool story around it. So we had a customer in region. They came in this week and they told the story. And I thought it was a great like citizen data accessibility story. And they had some other competitive tools in their enterprise, but they, obviously everyone does. They have an estate of reporting tools. They had a broad number of choices, but they said they're picking Power BI because of the ease of use and the quick ability to ramp. And so what they've done is, there was some announcements around tariff impact, right? Where there'll be potential changes in tariff. So they built within 1.5 days an executive dashboard that was used by their CEO and everyone, with a connected visibility of what their cost of goods sold was from the supply chain around the world, and then a slider bar in the Power BI dashboard to say if the tariff comes in from this or that around these things, what supply chain elements and what's it going to do to their product cost and manufacturing cycle.
Right. That's amazing.
I mean, this is an intern taking all this, and some of it was data from like websites and other stuff and everything else. And they essentially said, we have raw materials that could potentially be impacted by tariff. And within one day, they were able to make actionable insights and predictive dashboards with like dynamic sliders. So as the political winds change, they can go like, here's which way the wind's blowing. What is that? What, if anything, does that mean for my business? And I thought that was just such a cool actionability story, right?
That is amazing. And what I love about that too is the agility there, because I'm sure there was some data that they picked from their internal systems or supply chain system.
It was all over the place, right?
But then,
it was,
then from external websites, whatever. Some of the new capabilities around what we're talking about with the certification is you'll be able to go in and actually from a dashboard, right? So even if I'm a CEO who's savvy, right? Because a lot of these CEOs are really driving this culture of data change and ramping up these data organizations. I've had a few meetings in the last month of new organizations ramping up their new data organizations, hiring a CDO, those kinds of things, and it's really exciting. But being able to go from a dashboard to say, okay, this dashboard came from this data model, which came from this data set, which sourced from this SQL server, right? And I potentially, even as a report consumer, can see all of that in a one-stop shop in Power BI. So
it's amazing. It kind of reminds me in some ways of the new, if you haven't checked it out inside of Microsoft Teams, there's a call quality dashboard. And for years we put call quality data, but now there's a simple visualization in the Teams call quality dashboard that says, here's the person, here's the network they were connected to, here's their connection to the service, and here's the other side of that chain. Right. And they score, and they just tell you this call was good, and you can look at all the different legs. And if you need to, you can drill in, but everyone has transparency to understand what happened end to end. And to me, that's some of the things you're now seeing around Power BI. You can see the entire thing simply from end to end.
That's exciting. That's awesome. Yeah. So we got on a little tangent there, but I think it's worthwhile. So I'll kind of say I'll be showing some of those things off in the next few weeks around providing certification and trust in data in an organization and enabling reuse. So I think that's pretty exciting. So Report Builder can now connect to Power BI data sets, including, by the way, data sets that are in pro workspaces. So your data set does not have to be in a premium workspace for this to work. You still have to deploy your report to a premium workspace, but your data set does not have to be in a premium workspace. Just kind of heads up there.
I don't understand. I think it would probably be good for us to spend a little time exploring how all that is managed and what it means.
Okay.
Twice now, I've had customers come in the past couple of months. They're like, I want to have these data sets and these people, and I have knowledge workers and I have employees, and I want to understand how to architect this thing at just a kind of a baseline level.
Okay.
And I think we've changed it so much that maybe not everybody's caught up to how all that works.
All right. So then maybe what I'll do is
I'm not going to be here next week, just so you know. You did not know that, but now you know. I'm not going to be on the show next week. Perfect, so you're flying. So if you don't mind taking the topic next week to kind of dive in a little on that, that would be awesome.
Cool. That sounds good. Are you available next week? Okay, got it. I've got a Jay here, my modern workplace person. So let's see. So yes, all right, sounds good. We'll move on from that, but I think there's some good ideas there. SaaS embedding a paginated report. So if you're doing Power BI embedded, to date, you've been embedding kind of Power BI analytics types reports. You can now embed paginated reports, which is exciting. So coming up from a embedding perspective or just passing URLs to paginated reports, over the URL. That's cool. So you can have your application link out to a paginated report, passing URLs over the URL. Secure embed, and that would be kind of where the SaaS embedding or Power BI embedded is for externally facing applications. This would be internal, right? So I want to be able to embed paginated reports from Power BI inside internal applications. That's what this is. And then we're going to be turning on monthly subscription options as well. So we're down to the hour, and now we're going back to the month, depending on the lens of the data that you need to look at on a regular basis.
Very nice.
Yeah, very nice. All right. Kind of a developer, it's been a while since we've talked about from a developer perspective. This one's super important. So service principal embedding is now enabled in GA. So rather than having to acquire a pro license and have that be the thing that's connecting to your Power BI APIs, you can now do that via a service principal, which is a best practice and super secure. So that's good. We just talked about the embedding of the paginated reports. So being able to,
Todd, I want to pause on that.
Yes.
So we always say that, like we always say, but I mean, I want to make sure people know why, because the service principal is a constrained security principle for a specific purpose, as opposed to a user account, which has an interactive capability and potentially other breadth of service accessibility.
yes.
So it essentially constrains it to the bare minimum footprint against which you can have, and you can do a lot more. Basically, it's a much more governable construct than having a service account or a user, which of course can have all these other things attached to it.
Yeah. So I'm not going to acquire some special license and account that's, could be a human, and we're just naming service account. This is specifically for the express purposes of a service type connectivity.
It's a scoped service connection with a very specific set of permissions, not a user that we're trying to convert into one of those things. It simply is that, which is a really important principle. And you'll see that throughout, like when Todd and I demonstrate things on Flow and graph connections and stuff, we always try and use those, registrations and security and service principles instead of make me an admin account.
Right. Or worse yet, Doug, right?
Or worse, yeah, let's not.
Yeah.
That would be bad.
So this one I thought was really cool, and I think it's going to enable some really neat situations for ISVs and applications. So being able to programmatically create visuals in your application. So why would I do this? So I could enable users to go through a wizard that I specify as an application developer and end up generating a visible based on a visual. We'll spit that out. Based on the items they selected in a wizard, and I can save that out, and it's now a Power BI visual, which I think is pretty cool. So providing customization options, and even doing things like a chatbot. I thought that was a creative idea. So where I could go into your app and start to ask questions based on, maybe I'm using Lewis, which is a cognitive service to understand natural language, to go and build out Power BI visuals based on what the user is asking for vocally or even typing, right? So I think that's kind of really cool.
Yeah.
Some performance improvements and things like that. So go check that out. The new filter experience is now enabled in Power BI Embedded. And this is one, I think maybe we've mentioned it, but there is a new tool out on, I think it's over on GitHub, that's around load testing for Power BI premium capacity. So I think this kind of touches on what you were bringing up earlier, Doug. How do I manage these capacities from a lot of different perspectives? There's an assessment tool out there that works on kind of doing load testing and how many users and how many.
Yeah, it's really, we've changed a lot over the years, and it's much like we kind of we need to do this now that everything's been released and we've sort of had a chance to absorb it around the Power Platform from the PowerApps and Flow standpoint.
Right.
Essentially now you can license users or you can license business processes on the Flow side, and you can license an app or you can license all users for an infinite number of applications, right? And now, I think just because we've sort of caught up with a lot of these use scenarios and we have different capacity and user alignment, and how do you handle the crossover between it? Because I think people are now philosophically like, I know I can do this, but we almost need to start back at, okay, here's the current state and here's how you go forward.
That's right. That's right. Makes sense. Okay. So a couple quick, I'm just going to do some quick hits on the PowerApps, Doug, because it's been a while since we've really dived into this.
Yes, it has.
So the public preview for the PowerApps portal is now open to everyone, and this is the kind of the new portal where you start creating either a model-driven app or a Canvas app. I can create a portal, which is interesting. So this idea of PowerApps as a web page builder, content builder, which is interesting.
Well, yeah, let's pause on those. So the PowerApps portal pages, like that whole announcement is one of those things that it fundamentally allows you to present in the context of web pages and licensed by views and authentications and other ways, Power Platform components, right? I mean, this is a transformative thing if you really wanted to do extranet style work and expose applications in that manner.
Yep. Yeah, it's totally, yeah, it's a really big announcement. And one of the things, I'll just jump to the end here, is that all the sessions, and again, I think we may have mentioned this, but this is definitely worth repeating. All of the Business Application Summit 2019 videos are up, and this blog post has a really good kind of key or table of contents over to, things on PowerApps, things on Flow, the Common Data Service, even down to admin and governance. DevOps against the Power Platform has really become a hot topic recently. So definitely go check out this session. A lot of things around the Power Platform portal that we just mentioned are in there. So, all right. The ISV Studio is available, right? So if you're developing things around, we're jumping a little bit over to the Dynamics side, but Dynamics Customer Engagement or PowerApps, you now have an ISV portal that you can use. More around app source certification, leveraging the DevOps tools I think that we talked about last week around PowerApps, and making sure there's that you're checking all the boxes around what you need to do to be approved to get your app over on AppSource, including using that PowerApps checker as part of your DevOps pipeline. Keyboard shortcuts and right click, right? So I think this one is, I thought this one was a GIF, maybe it just kind of timed out. But being able to actually have a right click menu and manipulate things like that and use the keyboard shortcuts is rather nice, I would say. We've talked about the management of the gateways in the PowerApps portal, being able to share out your Canvas PowerApps using CDS with Azure AD security groups instead of individual users. That's a best practice, right, for obvious reasons. So that's just a maturity thing. And then the videos. So I know that was a quick run through, but Doug, I wanted to make sure and you had adequate time to cover your things. But this is a good kind of roundup post over the last month and a half or so. Check out the videos from the Business Application Summit, and I'll have those links posted in the show notes.
Awesome.
Right on.
Okay, well, let's cut over and talk about this. So the first one, I want to open with something fun. Did you see the announcement that we've released sort of an app solution for doing list search within Teams? Did you catch that one at all?
That's pretty cool.
So let's go over full screen on top of it. And so essentially one of the things people have been asking about is how do I do sort of list integration and collaboration? Because there's a lot of data within lists, right? And so, and there's now over 13 million users in Teams and 500,000 organizations. So it's fairly popular on top of it. And so what they said was, hey, internally, we wanted to have the ability to post and collaborate on our list items. So essentially, there is now an integration you can do in a chat where you can get a list search. You can do that, and it'll essentially post that list in as an adaptive card within the chat session. Okay, so you can cut back. So enough said. This is a very compelling user experience. This is great. Like you need to go turn this on for your organization. The links are in here and where to go do it. This one is like, we showed the other one, the sort of icebreaker solution, right? Where people can meet each other or whatever it is. And I was like, oh, that one's kind of cool. No. This one is way more than that. Like this is really, really good.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I mean, you mentioned the 13 million Teams users. There's a lot more even SharePoint users. So people have a lot invested in the SharePoint list items. This is great. I like this.
It's great. I don't have anything else to say other than please go check it out. I think that's just absolutely amazing on top of it. Okay, so returning my roundup, we did have some announcements. Do you see the announcements with Samsung? Where at the Galaxy Unpacked event, we did the native integration of Samsung applications on top of it, and kind of sort of a coalition of announcements around the Galaxy Note 10. So
I think the numbers that caught my eye, Doug, were the battery life on those devices. Pretty crazy.
I think it's worth checking out. I think there's a lot of stuff on there, and there's their new Windows 10 with the LTE embedded stuff, whatever else it is. We got to see some insider stuff, which obviously we can't share with you, around like what people are doing with device form factors and everything else. It's a great time to need full function compute across operating systems and to be able to seamlessly share across the devices you use. It's a great time to be consuming and looking at devices. That's all I gotta say about that, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like everybody has the device form factors, battery life, connectivity combinations. I think I did see on there, did you see that they had the 1 gig, the gigabit LTE connectivity is built into one? That's crazy.
Those devices are slick. I love to see the innovation.
It's crazy. I mean, and I love the partnership between that. I'll tell you, I've now, as you know, I've moved back and forth between, Droid and iOS and back and forth because all my stuff's in the cloud accounts. I can just flip, right? Yeah. And the only thing I had was a couple of things around video and stuff. My whole family's moved to common services like Snapchat for some of those sort of things. So I'm like, now I don't really care. Like
Right.
I'm no longer OS bound. And so the best device wins in my world,
Totally.
which is kind of cool, right? And our stuff runs on top of anything. It's funny, I was on a plane the other day and I kind of looked down the aisle, you could see everybody working.
Yep.
And no matter what kind of device they had, every person I saw on the plane had Office open.
Yep. That's awesome.
It was Office across every operating system platform. And everyone was in like PowerPoint and Word and Excel doing spreadsheets. But there was all different operating systems. I was like, that's awesome. That's like a telling moment for our story. And obviously, I see a lot more surfaces, as Todd hides behind his studio over there.
Yep.
So anyway, so I thought it was a pretty cool announcement on top of it. Now, this next one's in case you missed it, which is about Azure AD collaboration and direct federation with SAML and WS-Fed providers is now in public preview. This is Greg Kostick out of Denver had sent you and I a note about this, right? And we'd seen it. It came from Alex Simmons on the Azure group. And so let's cut full screen on this one because this one's kind of an important announcement in case you missed it. So essentially what it allows you to do is to have a direct federated relationship. If you look down the bottom here, sort of where 3 and 4 are, where you're having a non-Azure AD identity provider, so Fabricam. So if you have a subcontractor or something and they need to come back in to your Azure AD, you can now have a direct federation between you and them and then share applications throughout it. So here's kind of what it looks like on the inside, where you're going to create a peering relationship between SAML and WS-Fed providers.
Very cool.
And so it allows you to have that secondary organizational relationship and still leverage your cloud identity in order to provide that. All right, so let's cut back. If you have someone who has their own SAML provider and is either downstream from you, maybe you're a holding company, maybe it's a limited partnership, maybe it's a joint venture. There's a million reasons to do this.
Yep.
But before we were kind of like, they either have to join Azure AD and get their up. Now that's not a difficult lift, but for some organizations, if you already have a peering relationship or they already have, it is a constraint. And so this just simply gives you yet another option. Now I would say to you, your first motion should be to see if the person will take a more modern approach to going directly to the cloud, right? But if for some reason you're constrained or you have a security or a contractual relationship where you can't do some of those things, here's an option, right? Either business justification or not. So I think this is a really important announcement and it's something that that's worth paying attention to.
This was a blocker before, right? I mean, what were people doing before this? Just dealing with.
They would essentially do the individual B2B invite technique, right? Where I just email it to you and then you register and you have the discrete credentials and we just kind of let it roll, right? Okay. And so we were treating them almost as if they were sort of a B2B consumer account. Right. Was how I would treat those other organizations. But then they were not taking advantage of their individual identity provider. Yes. Now, obviously, if they go register their namespace against it, and it's a same namespace, and the primary namespace relationship to a public endpoint is registered, then that's going to win. Right. So you can't seize Woodgrove. If Woodgrove decides to go directly to Azure AD and their users go to authenticate, then they've chosen the primary relationship. But does that make sense?
Yep. No, that's awesome.
But this is an awesome technique for the case where Woodgrove hasn't done that, or you want to do selective sharing on scoped domains of identity, right. And allow those to be shared between your organizations.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and again, it's a little bit of a post that's been out for a little bit, but I realized I don't think we ever really dug in on it. If we did, we certainly didn't give it justice that people should pay attention to it. So go check that one out. I think it's a great use case in a supported area. And if you blend it with some of the announcements around direct SAML support for applications through Azure AD App Proxy that we covered, which is what brought this one back top of mind. Yep. We've really done a whole lot of better support for all these more advanced or historical scenarios around ADFS and SAML support. Sorry, WS-Fed and SAML support.
Okay.
All right.
Love it.
Next up for me, kind of a fun one that I thought from the enterprise mobility. Did you see the configuration designer for OEM config for Android release at all or no?
I did not see that one.
All right, so on the this is definitely the Doug side. So on the EMM, the manageability side, there's this Android initiative around enterprise management features. It's kind of a standard taxonomy for enterprise feature management. And so the goal behind it is that historically, if we cut over to this one, we had delays behind how it would work. So OEM builds functionality, then the EMM manufacturer does it, the admin configures it, and then it goes. But then the problem about that is that the OEM builds it and there's this delay before someone like Microsoft can go ahead and implement those configurations, right? So
Yep.
now when OEM config is released, it is instantly available. You can cut back within the Intune framework. And how they did that was they released in an actual configuration designer. And if you look in, you can see here for the OEM config, like there's a Knox service plugin where you're configuring the service profile and everything else. So go check this one out. This is really great. I was just like pleasantly, it just shows maturity. That's all it does.
Yep,
And it
yep.
gets us out of the way to say, hey, look, if long as they're adhering to the Android standard for the OEM config, there's a reference to Google's blog on the Android community around how the OEM config stuff work and how Samsung did their release around Knox and enterprise admin features. But as manufacturers at the OEM level support something within this framework, it is no longer a waiting game to have that capability. The OS releases it with the device manufacturer, and you've got it.
What kind of lag would we generally see in the past? Is this like a days, weeks kind of thing, or?
Yeah. Sometimes it depends, right? It really depends on it.
But now we're down to basically right away.
Right away, because we're no longer in the middle. And I, like everything else, we would have to do prioritization around features and capabilities. Sure. Now, because of this sort of standard for the OEM config component, our support for it natively within our EMM tool, we're out of the way.
The bottleneck. Yep.
Correct. Now, there are some things we will still do as things release. We may move them up or move them around and put them in a better place in the UI or anything else, right? But for anything that supports this framework, you got it now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was just particularly pleased with that because I've been involved with some enterprise Android stuff over the years, and you're like, oh, well, that released, but it's not quite there yet. And that makes sense because they release it, you QA it, you go through, now you're kind of out of the pipeline. But it does require people to adhere to a standard in order to make this stuff work, right?
Yeah, it's in everyone's best interest to do so, though, right?
Would be, it sure is. On top of it. All right, so there's that one. Now, this next one is just kind of fun, and I think is
I
my
was
last
hoping you
one
would pull this one in. Yeah, this is
for the
good.
week. Did you see this?
Yeah,
so,
I did.
Okay,
I almost pulled it in, but I ran out of time.
Yeah, I am. If you've ever watched this show, if you are a watcher of this show, you know how much I love security. It's my academic pursuit. It's a whole lot of what I do around for Microsoft is help people do practical security on top of it. And what I loved about this is a post from the Defender ATP research team around the shift from unstructured data, from sort of the chaos of signal intelligence. And I always say, I said in the blog post, if you know what an IOC is, you should read this. If you don't know what an IOC is, you should read this. Right? So no matter what, if you have any interest in this, and so it is an indicator of compromise, right? And so they talk about the signals that indicate like indications of compromise, but it's like anything else. As soon as you start figuring out it as a community and talking about the way that you're looking for signals, then the people who are attacking you will seek to mask those signals, right? So it's through obfuscation and hiding of different things. And so basically what they've done is this post goes through how quantitatively and from an AI and machine learning, you're going to look for affinities and signals of intelligence and origins and the rest of it. So it basically talks about how you use data to achieve a better, more dynamic indication of compromise based on complicated behavioral models, as opposed to a baseline signal which can be obfuscated. Right? And so this is just wonderful. It's just a wonderful post about the value of data and what you can do with it and why it matters and why we're so passionate about the Intelligence Security Alliance, the Intelligence Security Graph, and the Security Graph API as this sort of big confederation of things that allow us to have a common data model across it, a common API for bidirectional security workflows, and an integration framework amongst partners. I've said it before, it's like fire safety, right? You would not want to disconnect the signal in the smoke detector in your building from the thing that alerts people to evacuate from the heat sensors that do fire suppression. Right? You want those things interconnected, because if they're not, then you have to do all that work yourself, right? And you got enough work to do through your evacuation plan to get the humans out, right? There's still work to be done. So I am super enthusiastic about the work that's being done, and I've talked about how important this is before when I do like executive briefings and all sorts of stuff. So here is just a really nice, thoughtful, scholarly work on what it means and what we're doing with it, and therefore what the value is to you behind this kind of an approach. So please take a few minutes for a geeky security read in a good way around how AI and machine learning help keep you safe.
One thing from a data perspective too, it's amazing because these are all the same techniques that we talk about with customers for using ML and AI to transform their business, right? And it brings me into that security space. So I think this is kind of for everybody. This is awesome.
It is for everybody. It's just a great story around like the value. And if you think about these techniques, if you're a security person, this will give you an appreciation for why AI and machine learning has business value throughout your organization. Because although you may be using it for this particular use case, certainly that's there's a lot more to it than that. So.
Right.
All right then.
Go to Doug.
Yeah. Did you see the pop-up?
I did.
Like I thought I was in Do Not Disturb. I'm in a call, right? But I have a lot of other ones.
That just means it's time to go, I guess.
It does mean it's 11 o'clock. Thanks for calling me out for that one. I'll make sure to return the favor. All right. Well, that is it. We are at 11 o'clock. We're at a prompt wrap up. Emily has put the thanks for watching banner up. So thanks to Emily for producing us as always for it. I will not be here next week. I'll be back the week after. You're going to have a Jay co-host with you out of
maybe. I'm not sure if he's available yet. We'll find out.
Well, if not, Corey or Jay, somebody will be here to take my spot and nod at Todd like I do when he talks about data.
Yeah. Right on.
Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you I'll see you in 2 weeks. Todd, you'll be here next week?
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody. Be good.
Enjoy.